I was recently invited to IMAX headquarters where I gave a full breakdown of the Alien franchise in preparation for Romulus, but there's a lot of stuff I had to leave out of that presentation, especially about the first movie, so I wanted to come back and do a quick deeper dive into the 1979 Alien. Now, one of the most interesting bits of background information I can give you regarding Alien is its connection to Dune. You thought I was done talking about Dune? Wrong. One of Alien's original writers was this guy, Dan O'Bannon. In addition to writing, he also worked in special effects. So one day, O'Bannon gets a call from director Alejandro Jodorowsky, who's wanting to make the first adaptation of Frank Herbert's novel, Dune. Jodorowsky wanted to hire O'Bannon to be the director of special effects on his Dune movie. Sadly, Jodorowsky's Dune never got made. There's a whole documentary about it. It's a super interesting story. I recommend checking it out. But most importantly, for our purposes, while working on Dune, Dan O'Bannon would become aware of an artist that would go on to play a vital role in Alien becoming what it was. And that was H.R. Giger, whose style was both very striking and a little disturbing. That style is called biomechanical. His pieces usually feature a lot of aspects that look like organs, and specifically reproductive organs, but in this sort of mechanical way. And this example is pretty tame. A lot of his other works can get pretty visceral, but it makes complete sense for Alien with the themes and what they're going for, but we'll come back to that. Jodorowsky had specifically hired Giger to do work on the concept designs for the Harkonnens in his adaptation of Dune. Now, just a reminder, in the new Dune movies, the Harkonnens are the pale, bald people, the villains, essentially. And while I think the designs that ended up in the new Dune movie are very cool and original, I don't think it's entirely without influence from Giger's style. So once Alien was officially greenlit, Dan O'Bannon pushed really hard for the studio to hire Giger to design the Alien. And while the studio was initially really resistant, thinking it would be too weird or off-putting, they eventually conceded, and Giger went on to have a major role in designing the Alien from 2D concepts all the way to 3D models. Now, well before the movie was greenlit, multiple drafts of the Alien script were turned in to 20th Century Fox, but all of them were rejected, and one of the biggest reasons is that the studio already had a sci-fi movie they were about to release that they were fully convinced was going to be a complete financial disaster. When that movie, Star Wars, went on to be the highest grossing movie ever at the time, suddenly Fox was very eager to make another sci-fi movie, and Alien just happened to be the top thing on their desks with a spaceship in it. Now, I talked a little bit about this in my other presentation, but the production design, set decorating in this movie, it's all fantastic. And one of the most interesting sets that I didn't get to talk about is this one, which the filmmakers and fans now call the Space Jockey. And by the way, even though the set was huge, it wasn't this big. These are all kids in costume meant to make the set look bigger. And what's really crazy is that we never returned to this set again the whole movie. At least not in this movie. Prometheus covers it, but we'll talk about that another time. The goal here was for the audience to feel like there was a bigger world at play, and for there to be a whole air of mystery around the alien. Like, where did it come from? What was involved in before? And they had to push hard against the studio because, as you can imagine, executives didn't really like the idea of spending a whole lot of money on a big set that didn't technically have a story impact. But I think the success of the movie is a testament to the idea that the filmmakers may have had the right idea. And now on to the infamous chest-bursting sequence. I think because the moment's so shocking, sometimes we forget about how well done the lead-up to that moment is. See, before this, there was a lot of tension because Kane had been brought back to the ship with the face hugger attached to his face. But when it dies and just sort of falls off, the tension fizzles a little bit. And not completely, because the audience knows something's up because the movie's not over yet. So we come to this meal scene, and we're leaning in because we know something has to happen, but we're not sure what. And this scene is actually a little bit frustrating to watch, but it's by design. All the characters are talking over each other. You can't really hear anything. It's kind of hectic, and none of it's really important. It's all just chit chat, but we think it's important because the camera lingers on it and something has to happen. So we're straining to listen to it. We're trying to figure it out. And this is building that tension. It's deliberately agitating the audience. That's exactly what Ridley Scott wanted to do. He wanted the audience to be on edge so that when Kane starts convulsing and choking and thrashing, we're already pretty tense, and it only ramps it up higher. Of course, the tension bursts when the alien also bursts out of Kane's chest. Now, even before this scene went on to become iconic, Ridley Scott and the rest of his crew all knew it was pivotal. It was the scene that got the script sold in the first place. So they knew if we don't get this right, this movie's dead in the water. Now, to achieve the effect, they rigged a puppet on a hydraulic arm that would burst up through the table and through a fake chest. Now, the actor would be on top of the table with his head and arms, but the rest of his body would be under it. And as you can imagine, that wasn't very comfortable, so the crew kept feeding actor John Hurt a constant supply of cigarettes and alcohol. Now, the way the famous story goes is that Ridley Scott was able to get genuine reactions from the actors, and that's kind of true, but kind of not. Now, it is true that Ridley Scott was hoping to get genuine reactions from the actors and went to great lengths to try to make that happen. Like, the actors were kept away from set during setup and rehearsals and that kind of thing. They obviously knew to some extent what was going to happen. They'd read the script, but they'd kind of been kept in the dark about exactly how the effect was going to be achieved. But when they arrived on set, they knew something was up because the whole crew, Ridley Scott included, were wearing like jumpsuits and the cameras and lights were covered with glass panels, so they knew it was going to get messy. Here's the wrinkle in the story. The hydraulic arm wasn't working correctly at first. See, Ridley Scott wanted it to burst through the chest and through a shirt in a very specific way. He didn't want it to just rip immediately. He wanted the shirt to stretch. So the crew had put material on it to kind of dissolve it, kind of not, and the hydraulic puppet just wasn't able to fully burst through on the first several takes. Essentially saw the puppet, and they really weren't going to be too scared about what was going to happen. So on the last take, Ridley Scott tells the effects team to aim all the pipes they're going to shoot fake blood directly at the actors' faces and to just let them have it. Figured if he couldn't scare them at the chest burster, he would just douse them in fake blood and hopefully that would do the trick. And it did, because the actors had seen several takes. They thought they knew what was going to happen. They were all leaning in to see if the hydraulic was going to work, and when it did and it shot up, and then all of a sudden gallons worth of fake blood just shot directly into their faces. That did shock them. Veronica Cartwright, who played Lambert, received the brunt of it, and her reaction is absolutely genuine. I said that we would come back and talk about the design and Giger's art style and how that plays into the themes. Here's a quick glance at some concept art for what the alien was originally going to look like before Giger came on. It was very much a more standard alien design. Now, the filmmakers, especially Ridley Scott, knew that they were probably going to need something a lot more striking, more terrifying, more genuinely alien or foreign, or this movie wouldn't work. And Giger's biomechanical style fit the bill for two reasons. The first is they liked the idea of the creature looking organic and manufactured at the same time. Parts of its body look like tubes and wires, like it was built for this, like it was designed. And the second reason that Giger's style works so well is because it strengthened the themes about sexual violence. I discussed this a little bit in my other presentation, but the true underlying fear of Alien is the threat of this kind of violence and that it could happen to anybody. In fact, in the script, all the characters were given androgynous names because the writers didn't think it mattered which gender they were except for one character. And that was Kane, the first victim, who they wanted to be male to really drive home the point. But it doesn't stop there. Everything about the way the alien functions and its design is meant to call back to those themes. I mean, just look at its head, or the way that it attacks Lambert with its tail later in the movie, or that it always attacks with its second mouth. It's all just meant to heighten that aspect of the story. One last big thing that I wanted to talk about with Alien that I didn't have time for in my other presentation is that I think it has one of the most underrated, greatest twists. Ripley goes to talk to the ship's computer AI system, and she discovers that one of the other crew members has been instructed by the company to bring the alien back, and as part of that directive, the rest of the crew is expendable. And that crew member that's betrayed them all is Ash. Ripley confronts him, they get into a fight, she managed to scratch him, and we see this trickle of white milky liquid coming out of his scratch where there should be blood. It's super unnerving and weird. The other crew members show up to help Ripley. Ash's head is knocked off, revealing that he's been a robot all along. He's an android specifically meant to serve the company and the company only. It's just another one of those things that broadens the world and makes the movie so rich. And the best part about rewatching this movie is that you can find hints about Ash being an android and his betrayal throughout the movie. And my very last thing is that I wanted to briefly touch upon Alien Isolation. Now, the direct sequel to Alien was Aliens, directed by James Cameron, and I love that movie. But I can understand if some people don't vibe with it or if it wasn't what they wanted because it's very tonally different from Alien. But to this day, for people who wanted a more loyal sequel to Alien, what's the best option? Well, I have seen Alien Romulus, and I do think that out of the movies, that gets closest to the tone of the first one. But I think really the closest thing out there is a video game, Alien Isolation. The story follows Ripley's daughter, Amanda Ripley, trying to search for her mom after she went missing on the Nostromo, and the design of this game is phenomenal. Everything looks, sounds, feels exactly like the tone of that first movie. Now, what the game is known for is its AI system that guides the Xenomorph. It's called a stalker enemy. Most of your encounters with the Xenomorph are not scripted. They're not like a boss battle. It's just roaming the station trying to hunt you down. And it reacts to your actions. So if you're making a bunch of noise, then it's going to hear that and it's going to come right to your position. If you're more interested in just the story, I do believe that IGN teamed up with the studio and uploaded to YouTube a bunch of webisodes that are essentially like the cutscenes of the game to kind of tell the story if you don't want to play the game. But I can't recommend it enough. And that wraps it up for today. That's most of the stuff that I left out, at least regarding the first Alien movie. Would love to hear if people want to hear about the other ones or what they thought of Romulus. Yeah, just let me know. Have a good day.